Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Future of Space. I'm your host, Daniel Fox. Our guests today are Gabriella and Kylie. Gabriella is a third-year Lebanese-American studying aerospace engineering at Arizona State University, where she is also the president of the Women of Aeronautics and Astronautics chapter. Kylie is a graduating fourth year honors student studying business and global politics at Arizona State University. She is the co founder of the ASU Space Ambassadors, along with the Interplanetary Initiatives. In 2022, Kylie won the grand prize at the International Space Development Conference in the Space Pitch competition. Gabriella, Kylie, welcome to the Future Space.
Hello, Daniel.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. After we met at the conference, you guys were so full of energy that, of course, I had to bring you on the podcast. So I'm pretty happy.
Thank you. Yeah, we're excited to be here.
Excellent.
Very.
So before we go on into why space and what's your inspiration and your motivation, I always start my interviews with the same two questions. And the first one is, give me three words that for you capture the essence of space.
Yeah, I can start us off. So 3 words that capture my essence of space is novel, growing, and changing. And novel because it's so new, it's so fresh, there's so much to discover, and then that leads into growing, that the aerospace industry is growing, but then space itself is also constantly growing. And then that leads into the third word, changing, that space is constantly changing. Not only is it growing, but we're discovering new things, and then parts of space are constantly changing. They're not going to look the same when we look at them again going forward.
For me, I would say my first word would be waiting. There's just so much that we haven't discovered about our universe, and the things that we have are eclipsed by the vast amount of knowledge that is waiting for us. And understanding more about the universe can help humanity, and it is evident in the knowledge that, again, is just waiting for us. So I think space is just kind of waiting for us to explore it, to understand it more. And then my second word would be dangerous, because space is dangerous. But as was said on Star Trek, boldly go where no one has gone before. And I think exploring space, exploring this dangerous thing is just so beneficial to humanity. And then my third word would be cool, because space is just cool. Like there's so many amazing things about space. So yeah, those are my 3 words.
I think that these new boundaries have to be dangerous because they force us to create new things and invites us to figure out new ways to go beyond, right? Whether it's beyond the mountains, beyond the river, there's always a certain risk or a certain danger that necessitate our capacity for invention, for innovation. If it wasn't the case, then I'm not too sure that we would kind of have that kind of innovative, spirit that we have. So the fact that it's dangerous is also reminds us of how humble we need to be, because independently of how much we think that we're capable of grand, things, which we are, but at the same time, we need that humility to bring us back a little bit, grounded on Earth. Gabriella, Kylie, I know that even in school and in science fiction, Star Trek, and pretty much everywhere, the space is a lot about the science and the technology, and more now there's the geopolitical reality with China and then the other countries' moon. There's a legal aspect, who's going to own, or who's going to have rights, or if they're going to have rights. But beyond that, what would you, for the two of you, what would you think is the human story of going to space?
Well, for me, I think the human story of going to space lies within the risks that we have taken to get where we are. It was a risk to send that first satellite into orbit. It was a risk to send the first human into orbit. It was a risk to land humans on Mars, on the moon, and it will be a risk to land humans on Mars. But taking those risks are what the history of humans in space is, and I think that is also the future of humans in space, is the risks that we take to advance our knowledge.
Yeah.
And exploration.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And for me, the human story going to space, along with risk, is curiosity.
Yeah.
Is that we just have a natural instinct for curiosity since day one about everything. And we are so curious about things that we don't know about. And space, we don't know most of it. And we barely know a little bit. And so just that constant feeling to learn more, to see more, to feel more, and to just answer questions and then just experience different ways of life.
Yeah, I agree.
Do you think the human story of space is different than any other human story here on Earth, whether it was, migrations between different countries, or when Europe, moved to North America, where we started our own little village and then we went beyond? Do you think that it's different because of this space, or it's still the same thing, but the scale of it just changes?
I think it's the same thing. The scale of it just changes. It's this new frontier that we have to get to explore,
Yeah, I agree. And I think that those questions that we've answered in the past of humanity, of exploring new continents or seeing how our body reacts in different climates, that's also questions that we're asking in space. Is, can we live on other planets? How does our body adapt in zero gravity? How does our body adapt on different planets? What does different weather look like? Can we grow food? And so we're answering all the questions that we've worked to answer or are still answering here on Earth, but we're looking to do it in space.
Yeah, I agree, even in terms of the policy and the legal side of things, like who owns the moon? How many satellites can you have? Yeah. Should we mine asteroids? So, yeah, like you said, it's like understanding. It's just a new frontier.
There's a lot of people who think that going to space or spending any funds or any effort into space comes at the expense of what we have on Earth and all the challenges that needs to be addressed here on Earth. What would you answer to that rhetoric?
I mean, it's there's opportunity cost in every decision that you make, but I also think exploring more into space could solve problems that we have here on Earth, and I don't think that not going into space will solve these problems. I think having that good balance is important.
Yeah, I agree. And I definitely think that we will always have problems here at Earth. There will always be things to solve. And even looking back in time, before we knew the Earth was round, before we'd documented every continent, that there were still problems being had in the hometown. And those problems never went away, or they were solved and then new ones arose. And so going forward, we will always kind of have those core issues, and we'll continue to evolve and solve them. And then hopefully going to space will help us solve those issues, and then we can grow as humans.
It's simply just the foundation of life. Life is messy by design, right? If it was perfect, where there's no evolution, there's no growth, there's no learning, and unfortunately, tension and disruptions are part of the fundamentals of what it is for life, to move forward. When the kids leave the family home, they leave with the intent of doing better than their parents, but at the same time, they will have their own mistakes, their own failures, and their children will not want to replicate what their parents did, but they will have their own lives to live. But that is how we learn, on the back of the people behind us, and setting the foundations for the people ahead of us. So, and then the thing that often, and Gabriella, you were talking about Star Trek. And maybe you can correct me on this one, but I think that Star Trek created the expectation that space could be a place where almost there are no more problems, right? There's no money, everything can be quickly fixed. But space will have its own set of challenges, and we need to prepare ourselves for that. We cannot be naive thinking that everything is going to be rosy. It's going to demand from us tremendous amount of discipline and courage and dedication to, to create the world that we envision.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think conflict is just a part of being human. You're gonna have conflict with people. It's just finding out how to resolve those conflicts. And I think space is just gonna have conflicts. You're not gonna have this idealistic utopia where everybody's equal and nothing goes wrong. There will always be problems.
I would definitely agree. And I think we can do our best to prepare, but space is so unknown that we're going to face conflicts that we've never faced before. And like a lot of people in the industry say, it's a new frontier. So it's going to challenge us in ways that we've never been challenged before, but I definitely think we're going to grow from it.
So now give me what is your brought you to space when you decided to apply at university? Was it an economic reason? Was it because you looked at what would be the jobs ahead of you and you said, this is going to be, my best chances? Was that because you wanted to work in space since you were a kid? So what brought you to Arizona State University in space?
Well, I came here. I like space because of my dad. He loved space. Space was always something he really wanted to get into growing up, but he couldn't. And for me, this was something I really wanted to do and something that we bond over. And so I got into space because of my dad and because of Chris Hadfield. Watching his videos growing up was a huge part of my childhood. But that's my first reason of going into space. I first came into ASU wanting to do an engineering degree to get the technical background and go to law school afterwards and work within like the policy aspect of space, because I think that is something that is going to be very much needed as we we expand our presence in space. But I really like the technical background, so I do want to end up in policy maybe sometime in the future, but I really want to get into the technical, get more understanding of that field before I go in and work on the policy.
Was your father so what was his interest in space? Just science fiction, or he actually works also on the engineering or something else?
I mean, I guess it was a mix of both. He, at the time, like he was in his 20s in the 80s when Star Wars was coming out. So I think that was a huge thing for a lot of kids. Watching Star Wars kind of got them into space. I loved Star Wars growing up. I loved Star Trek, a huge sci-fi nerd. But I think like what happened with me, what happened with my dad, and what happens with a lot of people that are in space right now because of sci-fi is as they grew up, their interest in space kind of matured along with them. So although it was kind of like this childhood belief of, oh my God, I want to live the life of Star Wars. I want to be Captain Kirk on the Enterprise. It matured into, I want to work on rockets. And obviously we still have that childhood want of exploring space and meeting extraterrestrials and going to new planets. But as we grow up, I think we mature from that sci-fi aspect.
I would like to note, Gabby has a very impressive comic book collection. It's very impressive, and it's still very big to this day and still growing.
Yeah, it's still that sci-fi nerd, but a more down-to-earth view of what space is and what the space industry holds for me, and I bet for my dad as well.
You better take care of the comic books because they become collectibles.
Oh yeah,
and people are serious about those.
They really are.
Kylie, what is? Yes, they are. Kylie, what is your background?
I have a more non-traditional aerospace background. So I went into school looking to go into a career in more policy and government. And my freshman year, I did an internship at the Arizona State Senate. It was really, really cool. It was nonpartisan, and it was during COVID, and I got to be on the floor of the Senate to see a lot of background things, but I realized working in state government is probably not for me. And I took a class my sophomore year called Space Business and Entrepreneurship. It was an elective, it sounded cool, and the whole idea of the class was that you developed a space startup and you pitched it at the end of the semester. And in the meantime, they brought in industry professionals. It was run by 4 very impressive professors here at ASU, and they would bring in professionals that were experts in robotics or experts in asteroid mining or space policy or space entrepreneurship. Other professors here at ASU, there was geology, astrophysics, all these amazing people, and over so many vast topics. And I thought it was so cool. I got to learn so much, and it kind of had what intrigues me about the government policy side of being able to talk about so much. But this was about aerospace specifically, and everyone was so passionate. And so I was like, oh, this is really cool. And just kind of networked my way through ASU with a lot of the professors and a lot of the industry professionals. Greg Autry, who you know really well, I asked him one time, I was like, how do I learn more about aerospace? I'm a business major. I don't have that technical background. And he recommended I start going to conferences. And so my sophomore year, I asked ASU for funding, and I've gotten to go to a handful of conferences. I've gotten to go to Ascend in Vegas. I went to the International Space Development Conference. I got to volunteer at New Space in Seattle with the Space Frontier Foundation. And I just have gotten to learn so much and have really fallen in love with the industry.
Nice. It is. That is something that really struck me. Also, the energy of the space industry, right? How they are motivated in finding answers. I spent 15 years doing solo wilderness expeditions and being involved in the environmental community and outdoor community, and I've always felt that there was this heaviness because there's this idea that if we could go back to a magic point in time where everything was perfect and we see ourselves as the root of all evil, and if we could take ourselves out, that would be, the earth would be so much better. You're constantly hearing that. And then you get into the space community and they're like, no, we're going to find solution, and space is part of the solution. And these are just engineering issues. We can figure out things. It was so much refreshing to be surrounded by a community that was excited about moving forward rather than trying to go back into the past. I guess that's the same thing that you experienced.
Definitely. And from a student perspective, over my time at ASU, I've done a lot of networking, a lot of question asking about what does your career look like? What does your job look like? And I noticed from more traditional business roles, from finance, real estate, it's a little condescending. It's a little bit like, you should know this. You could look this up online, kind of wasting my time. But with the aerospace industry, I would ask people questions that were probably fairly simple questions, but coming from a non-engineering background, I didn't know what was going on. Or I'd ask people, how do black holes work? How does rocket fuel work? What's the difference? Or what's the difference between different companies? And everyone at every level was willing to sit down and explain it to me and break it down. And I thought that was really cool, that just that energy was received and they wanted to help. They wanted to answer my questions.
Now, so were you able to learn to know what black holes are in one sitting, or?
Oh goodness, it was like a 2-hour conversation. The first 15 minutes I followed, and then after that I was like, I think this is a little above my head. Like, couldn't follow the vocabulary, but I'm trying.
Now there's I'm kind of curious, the generation, Gabriella, of your father and my previous generation, a lot of them got their inspiration from Apollo and the people walking on the moon. During the COVID, the landing of the 2 rockets, SpaceX, the landing upright of these 2 rockets was for me kind of an Apollo moment where my brain actually changed. I saw the future differently by understanding that this was now possible. It was no more science fiction. Was it the same for you? Was there something in the recent 10 years that made you kind of see the world differently?
That is a very good question. I feel like what has really made me see the world differently, especially the space world differently, would be the being more active within the community. Like when I was in high school, I didn't get as many opportunities to meet people in the industry, to meet people working, to go to conferences, but once I got to college, I got this opportunity to actually talk to people in the field, and that completely changed my view on the world, on space, on everything as a whole. I feel like it decreased this idealization of space that I had, and at the same time, it made me see that NASA's kind of like no longer the only space actor. Like there are so many huge space actors now that are not governmental, that are, private corporations, which I like completely changed the way that I see the world, because I'm like, whoa, it's not just NASA now, you know?
Yeah, I definitely agree that I think as I learned more about the industry over the past few years, that you grow up and you just think NASA. And that's kind of all you know. And the cool thing about NASA is I do feel like it's worldwide, it's known worldwide.
Yeah.
That I did a study abroad in Spain for a semester, and anyone that I talked to knew what NASA was. And I'm like, that's really cool that it's just known so well. But definitely, like as I got to know the industry, also realizing that like rocket scientists aren't too far away. Like you could talk to them, or people that work at NASA. Like I'm really grateful to have a handful of friends that work at NASA or are mentors of mine, and they could also just give me life advice too. That they're like, oh, you'll be okay in your career, or like, oh, these are the kind of rocky points that I had to get here, and I worked really hard. And you just view them as people, not as these like on a pedestal as a rocket scientist. It's like, whoa, this is crazy.
Yeah,
that's
so true.
It's definitely like humanizing once you're talking to people, that it's like, oh, they're just everyday people that worked for their passion and now they work on rockets.
Yeah, it kind of makes like the goal to work in the industry feel less of a challenge, because you're like, oh my God, like we both like cheesecake. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like we have these stuff in common. You're actually not this like huge genius person.
Yeah.
We can both do the same thing, and it kind of humanizes them.
Definitely.
So cheesecake in space with Chris Hadfield?
Oh, that would be the dream. That would be super cool.
Now there's a lot of, like, in your generation and in school, I hear often that there's a lot of anxiety about the future, right? Whether it's climate change, whether it's all the problems. Do you think that space actually helps or doesn't help managing that anxiety, because it gives a direction to move forward. It gives a way to a certain strategy to deal with the current challenges that we have. Because I often I think that the anxiety that people have is also the anxiety of being stuck. Like we're stuck here. We have to figure these things, and then there's no way forward. But space helps actually developing that mentality to move forward so that we can take it. I mean, do you see the connection, or how do you think space fit in that anxiety that is felt in your generation?
I think at times it could add to the anxiety, like the effects on the climate, effects on the world. Like getting a rocket into space is not necessarily the cleanest energy transmitter, but I also think that space gives people a lot of hope. That the idea of thinking that there's another life form out there, that it kind of gives everyone a break of like their day-to-day hardships, that it's like, oh, let's wonder about this for a little bit and see, like, will we interact with another life form in our generation? Or look at this new picture that we found of a new galaxy, and it's absolutely stunning. It's really pretty. And it's like, oh, this is just so cool that it allows you to think outside of the box and kind of gives you hope that there is new stuff out there. There's things that are better. There's even the hope of like asteroid mining and bringing fuel, like fossil fuel type things, back to Earth and kind of replacing our existing fossil fuels. And so there's a lot of hope out there.
I agree. I think it depends on the perspective, especially like in students. Like some people are like, oh my God, space is scary, so unknown. And like that's completely valid. But also there are people that are like, wow, space, scary, so unknown. That's so cool.
Yeah.
So I think it just depends on how people view things.
Definitely.
It's not like oh my God, everybody believes this or everybody believes that. So it also depends on like what you're working on, what you know about space. So
yeah.
So so Gabriella, for you on the engineering aspect, what is one of the biggest challenges of engineering going to space?
Ooh. Well, I think the biggest aspect would probably be I don't know how to say this, reusability, I guess, of our resources. Like we have a finite amount of resources on Earth, and I mean SpaceX is getting good at reusing their stuff, and it's getting more excuse me, it's getting more common for those things. But I do think finding ways to make the things we engineer to be used for multiple times rather than be a single use thing is probably an engineering thing that we are dealing with. But I also think you can see as things progress, we are getting through this challenge and it's getting easier for us to tackle that.
And Kylie, on the geopolitics or the business aspect of space, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges ahead?
I think some of the biggest challenges are bringing people together and getting all the pillars of space to communicate. Even as a business major, I find it difficult to kind of understand what's going on sometimes. Like I said, I follow for the first 10, 15 minutes, and then I'm like, oh, I can't repeat what you just said. I don't really understand. Like it just sounds like a different language. And so that is really important when you're dealing with like so much money going into the industry, and you kind of have the business people dealing with the business side. And then you have the engineers that are building things, and the business people need to communicate to their investors or to the government or to their partners what is going on, but they don't fully understand. Or even government versus academia versus private versus nonprofit, and seeing how we can leverage everyone's strengths to build a better industry or to accomplish their goals faster, that when everyone stays in their lane, it's like, no, we should talk to each other. And a lot of people don't know what's going on just on what each company is doing.
Yeah, I agree. I think more communication between the business, the engineering, all aspects of the field could really go a long way.
Yeah.
It's most of the time, it's all about communication, whether you're in a marriage or your friends or even in the family, right? I said that, but I meant that, but I understood that, or this is not what I meant. All these bottom line is communication. If we could spend as much time teaching communication skills to people as we teach them about math or other things, because it's so much of life is about communication. And yet we live, I think, more and more in a society where we don't give people the skills to negotiate the complexity of communication that we experience in life, right? Is that something that if you had a class on communication, would you take it?
I think I would. Yeah.
Yeah. I had a class on communication, but I took it during COVID, so maybe it wasn't as effective as it could have been.
Yeah, I do think with engineers sometimes it's hard to communicate with each other because we're kind of more used to working on projects alone or, doing that kind of stuff not in a team, and you don't really do that until you get into college or into the workforce. So I think learning how to communicate even with other like engineers or other STEM fields at a younger age could help understanding the jargon in a sense.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
So if I've heard you talking a little bit, a couple times about space mining. I believe that space mining is going to be one of the best things that happens for Earth, because one of the problems that we have right now on Earth it's not the lack of resources, it's the extraction of resources. And the extraction, often is in place in countries that are often unstable, or in environments that are super complex or diverse. So the extraction becomes a problem. But once you're able to extract in places out of space that are barren of life, or that are not connected to a complex ecosystem, then you can allocate everything on Earth as more your backyard, where it's a national park. Um, how much do you see space mining as part of the solution for some of the problems that we have on Earth?
I definitely think it could solve a lot of problems if we're able to do it right and be able to find a way that it doesn't hurt the earth by leaving, grabbing other stuff, and bringing it back. Because, like Gabby said earlier, we have a finite number of resources here on Earth. The big question is what happens when we add to that. Like, how will the Earth respond? And then even just the process of going to go take things from an asteroid, for example, and bring it back. How is that going to hurt the Earth's atmosphere? And are we going to be able to reuse the rocket or the device that we use to go take it and come back? And so I think that there's a lot of questions that we still need to answer, but it's definitely a really cool thing that I think could solve a lot of problems.
Yeah. I also think there's a lot of policy issues that come with it. I remember one of our colleagues, Berkeley Adair, she had asked a question once about import tax of things coming in from space. And I was like, oh my God, I didn't even think of that. You're so right. Like,
and who pays that? What country? Where does these things land? Or what countries do the resources go to?
Yeah.
Because not all countries have the ability to send things to space and bring it back.
How do we also manage not breaking markets on Earth in terms of resource markets?
Yeah.
So
a lot of big questions.
Yeah. And when people ask you or compare, right, the space and just being a place for billionaires to spend their money, what do you answer, or how do you react when people throw that at you?
Oh goodness!
I mean, airplanes. Billionaires used to throw their money to traveling. Now it's become
the railroad system as well. That billionaires use. They built, at least in the United States, built the railroad system, and they were the big proponents to building infrastructure. And so I kind of think if they have the ability to build the infrastructure and kind of get that baseline, definitely let's take them up on it and then go from there.
Yeah, even exploration, sea travel, that was mostly something that people with money used to do. And then it became, everybody could do it. I think it's just, it kind of, like you said, you got to set up the infrastructure to allow for more people.
Yeah.
I don't think saying it's only a billionaire's thing is a valid response to space.
I think hopefully it'll only be a billionaire's thing for just a little bit.
Yeah, until we can actually figure things out.
Yeah.
Well, the billionaires have always been part of that cycle of technology, right? I mean, Gabriella, you were talking about ocean exploration. They just had, back then it was the kings and the queens, or the kingdoms who were financing. They were the only ones capable of financing these expeditions. Cell phone, we don't even think about cell phones being a luxury item anymore. Everybody has their own cell phones. But I grew up when cell phones came out, and it was a massive brick, and it was only just the ones who could afford it, or carry it in the car, because the antenna was bigger, and you had better reception if you had a phone that was integrated with the car. So it was in the console right between the seats. And so I grew up in times where if you had a phone in the car, you would do the typical joke of going to visit someone and then parking in front of their house and calling them, letting them know that you would be late because of some reason. And then you would get out of the car, and then you would go on and knock on the door, and then it would be like, "What? You guys just far away." And then here we are. So, but that is, that's the cycle. And planes, cars, these technologies have to be financed by people who can afford it before the R&D, the research and development, brings the cost down, and then it becomes ubiquitous to the
Yeah,
rest of the world.
exactly.
So it's
Yeah.
part of it.
Even computers, for example. Like
Yeah. They used to be big and chunky and expensive.
and then now they're small and you can get a Chromebook. So
Yeah.
The first IBM was like the size of a football field or something, or like a
Yeah.
yeah.
huge room. And now we have more power in our pocket than the space shuttle had in an entire rocket. And so yeah,
Yeah.
so things change. So when you look into the future, how do you view, what do you think the future, the technology wise, what, because when we look back, right, I was earlier, late last year, was down in Antarctica on a luxurious ship, you know having a Zoom call on the Zodiac right next to the ship, right, because of Starlink, things that would be impossible 20 years ago. It's really hard to, I mean, it's easy to look back and think, that's the past and here's the, today. But there's a future ahead of us that it's really hard for us to understand because we're incapable of seeing it. When I was flying over New York and I'm looking out the window and I'm looking at all these, and it was at night and there was these lights everywhere, skyscrapers, and I'm thinking a moment, I'm on the plane looking through the window. I'm in this flying object where I can sleep, I can eat, I can go to the bathroom, and I'm taking a picture with a device that also can connect me to someone across the world. If I had told the Italian explorer that first landed in New York 300 years ago that I would be doing that, they would throw me to the fire, thinking it's like witchcraft or something.
Yeah.
But there's a
That is
future like
true.
that. There's a future that disconnected from us, ahead of us. What do you think? Like, if there's some of your visions that you have about a future, and where you think it's realistically, right? Not science fiction, but realistically, what do you think the future can look like?
Well, I want to start off with, I think, the um, development of, I don't know if development's the right word, but I'm going to say use development for now, but the development of technology is exponential. I think we are right now on that little bell curve right before it starts increasing like really rapidly. And I think once we get past this curve and into that really rapid increase, it's it's hard to look into the future and say, oh my God, that's going to happen. But if I had to pick one thing that I really, 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 really want to happen, is flying cars, just because I think that would be so cool. I think that would be so cool. But yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that's the one part of the future that we're missing. That we're definitely living in what, like the Flintstones? Is that the name? Like the Flintstones, like their image of the future. Like we have everything but flying cars.
Exactly.
We're almost there. We have Waymo, so we have
Yeah.
self-driving cars.
But I think like 100 years in the future that people are going to look back and be like, oh my God, you guys drove on the ground and you guys drove the cars. Wow. Same way I look back to my parents and I'm like, oh my God, you guys sent letters? That's crazy.
Yeah, I traveled the Europe with a backpack, and I had because music was always important for me. I traveled with a giant case of CDs that were all scratched, and I had the yellow Sony, the Discman that I was carrying with me. So, and then today is like, what, you had only 50 songs with you, and then you were recycling them over and over. Today is like millions of songs that you can have on your device. So
Yeah,
the
that's true.
one of the things that I find really inspiring about the future is, if you look into the past, knowledge was not spread really everywhere. You had, a small number of experts that had to figure out pretty much everything. And now we have hundreds of thousands, we have millions of people that every day wake up trying to find solutions. And, in the future, we can think of a world where there's going to be billions of people that their sole reason of existence is to find solutions, to figure out, how to solve problems. And, Gabriella, you were talking about that exponential. Like the more people we have, ultimately, the more people we will have to work on these solutions. Is that like one thing that you can see in the future?
Yeah, I can also see it being, although we wake up every morning and we have like information about the entire world at our fingertips. I could see that becoming even faster. I could see, like, 10 years ago, you'd have to wait for like it to be like on the internet, or even old, like way before that, you had to wait for the information to be given to you like physically. But now, if like some researcher in, I don't know, France found something crazy, Americans get it instantly and they can be like, oh my God, we can use that for this. So I think what I see in the future is a faster transfer of knowledge between different groups of people. And then with more increased people, that knowledge becomes better, I guess.
I agree. And I think another thing to note is that we are very blessed to be living in a time where we're thinking outside of the box is supported, where it's not oppressed, and or at least in most of the world, that it's encouraged to think of new things, to discover, to learn, to try new things. And that I think that's going to contribute to that exponential growth, because so many people on so many different levels and walks of life are trying to learn and trying to discover.
Yeah, I agree. Like,
And you think AI is actually a tool that is going to be helpful as we move forward?
if used properly, I definitely 100% see how it could be used in the future. Right now, I can barely use AI to help me with my homework, but in the future, I could see how it could be a huge asset. Even right now, it's a huge asset. So
Yeah.
I can't wait to see what AI does.
I definitely agree. I think AI, there's a lot of learning to do as how to use it, but I think it could be the next Google search. I think like when the Google search bar became a thing, no one knew how to use it. We didn't know how to use keywords or how to ask it questions. And I think AI is in a similar stage right now where we don't really know how to use it effectively, but give it a few years, we'll be really fast with it and know how to use it to just make our life more efficient and make simple tasks become even simpler.
Yeah,
Ultimately, it's a tool. It's a tool like
it is,
any
exactly.
other tool, and it's a relationship between the tool and the other things around. And the humans are not static and powerless towards that tool. We always the capacity. There's a vision of humans that always bugs me. We see the world linear, thinking that these challenges of the technology evolves disconnected from us, right? That we're powerless. Oh, there's going to be a tyrant that is just, exist, and then we are there, a little powerless. But the humans we're a dynamic species. We react to the things around us, and if we have, a challenge over there, we rise to the occasion, and then we figure out things, ahead. And yes, the world is going faster, but so is also our capacity to deal with that world. And it's not, the technology is driving on a motorcycle, and then we're still on a little tricycle, trying to, we're on that bike, that motorbike, also driving with it and developing the skills. So that's what we have to remind ourselves, is that yes, this is happening, but also this here, we're happening, within ourselves too. Now, Heidi, Gabriella, quick question. Maybe it's words that been given to you from a mentor that you remember, or words that for you you've come to really live by and lead your life with. But what would be 3 words of wisdom? So Kylie's 3 words of wisdom and Gabriella's 3 words of wisdom.
You can go first.
Yeah, I can start us off. My 3 words of wisdom would be to do uncomfortable things. That nothing that I am proud of or have accomplished or has made my life better was comfortable. everything I've done was uncomfortable, whether it was stepping into a meeting, sending an email, even aerospace. Like I didn't know anything about it. And that was very uncomfortable at the beginning. And the more you do uncomfortable things, the more comfortable they become, the stronger person you become. And you're just able to grow and just live life to the fullest.
Yeah,
Nice. You should
I 100%
create a
agree.
T-shirt. Do embrace uncomfortableness. Do things uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Don't make the T-shirt
Yeah.
uncomfortable though, because that is not.
No,
Requires the
definitely it would have to be
Yes,
soft.
exactly. Gabriella, your 3 words.
Yes.
My 3 words would be the right people. Surround yourself with people who support you, who want to see you succeed, both professionally and in your personal life. Like I wouldn't be where I am without my parents, my siblings, my aunts, my uncles, my cousins, my friends who, even though they're not related to me, they want to see me succeed. They want to see me do well. And then in the professional aspect, you want to surround yourself with people who align with your goals, who you see yourself working with possibly in the future or having a good relationship with. It's being surrounded by those who will help you, who will be a positive aspect, a positive input in your life. That's what I would say my 3 words are. The right people.
Yeah.
Gabriella, Kylie, it was wonderful to have you on the Future Space. I'm so glad that we ran into each other during the conference. And I'm always, when people feel doom and gloom about the world, I always tell them, you guys don't hang out with the right people. Hang out with students that are just so inspired about figuring out solutions and, moving forward. Your take on the world is totally different. So thank you on behalf of many adults who should be hanging out with you a lot more. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for having us, Daniel.
Yeah, it was lots of fun.
We'll see you. We'll see you soon, and maybe we can have Chris Hetfield come and deliver some
cheesecake.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.